Building on episode 18, when I talked about purposeful habits, this is one of the things that Grandmaster Karen always talked about. And what he meant by purposeful habits is these kind of continuing actions that we all develop in our bodies to be able to deal with things. In other words, he kind of looked at it as a default mechanism. So for example, if I'm dealing with Jack, and this is all just, demonstration stuff so you get the concept. If I'm dealing with Jack and my hands are touching his hands, let's say we're just starting flow, right? One of the things I want to have as a purposeful habit is this ability to be able to shift back and forth and control my equilibrium based on what I feel. And the reason for that is the more I can control my equilibrium, the easier it is just for me to be able to move and do things should I have to do them. When Grandmaster Karen used to work with people, one of the things he would do, especially as far as a purposeful habit, and it was just his own idiosyncrasy, he liked to put his hands on top. I tell people it really doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is as long as I know where your hands are, I also know where they're not. But the idea is say my hands are on top, and let's say just you're going to bring that hand toward me. If he's going to bring this hand toward me, say to strike because he's trying to punch me in the throat, if I push his arm and I push it too far away, now I'm not only giving up my own hand, continue my friend, but I'm also creating an opportunity for him to recover. So one of the purposeful habits he had was a rule of moving as little as you need. So if he's doing the same thing, rather than me trying to push it away or create so much distance, I'm going to actually turn my body and I'm going to use my arms and I'm only going to move just enough where I can see now on this angle, he's going to miss. Or even if he hits me, it's going to be a graze. And so as I turn now, continue sending the arm forward. I know that because I'm already out of the way, because I've moved my body first, he's going to miss. In other words, the purposeful habit is instead of always trying to control everything by dominating or pushing, instead, I'm going to kind of redirect it and guide it to where I want it to go. But I'm not going to just do that. From there, then I'm going to hit as quickly as possible to not give them time to recover. And so that's something he would practice. So, for example, just 1 second, my friend. Say he's standing, or I'm standing in front of you like this. What Tim was really doing with his arms was he kind of always held his hands kind of like, almost like in a Wing Chun or Bagua posture, or even sometimes he looked like a boxer with his arms extended. And he would move very little in his hips and shoulders, creating these angles. Sometimes he would turn just enough, and you can see what I'm doing with my hand, where my hand has kind of got this kind of thing going. You see this in Wing Chun a lot, this kind of movement. And what they're doing is they're cutting off these angles, just like that. So he's doing these things, but he's also moving his body to get his body out of the way. Generally speaking, he always, just like Grandmaster Perkins, they always move their body first, no matter what. And the reason is, you can always, catch up with your hands if your body's out of the way, but you can't do it the other way around. Our bodies just cannot move as fast as our hands. So if I'm already moving my body, even if my hand is not moving yet, I can still start the process of getting my body out of the way. So he would do these little shallow things. Now, Grandmaster Perkins, as I showed you in the other video, his arms would be like this, and he would do these little things in here, mostly with his elbows. He liked to use his elbows a lot, and the reason was, if I'm working with Jack, and Jack is using his elbows primarily, and he's turning slightly to cut these things off, what it's also doing is it's freeing his hands up. So you see, it's like a boxer. John a lot of times would look almost like a boxer, where his hands would be up, and he'd be doing these little shifty things in here. And then as soon as you move and he felt it open, he would just pop you. So as Jack is doing this, what's happening is he's cutting down in the amount of movement he needs, and he's also keeping his hands relatively free. The other thing that Grandmaster Perkins would do is, say I'm going to hit you in the throat. I hit you in the face because I'm trying to end a fight. He would bring his hand up. Sometimes it would be underneath his chin. Sometimes it would be on his chin. It really depended on what he felt he needed to do. But he would get his hand somewhere around in this area right in here, and he would bring that elbow towards you as he pocketed and turned his body. And what would happen is, as he's doing that, he's protecting his throat, he's protecting, underneath his chin, and he's using his body to kind of blade, but also he's using his elbow to bring it around to hit you with. And he's also moving in at the same time. So we'll go slow so people can see it. So it becomes one fluid motion. So even if I go to block it, the problem is, in order to stop that elbow from coming through, I got to really stop his body from moving. So as he was doing these things, other things he was doing in here is, he wasn't just turning, and I want you to understand this, he was actually using his elbow like a tool. So say, for example, he was turning and he felt my arm go down, he would actually, slip his arm over top and hit you anyway. Or if he felt me trying to get underneath to push, he would drop down. So he would just drop his mask down. So the answer was, you had to stop his body from moving. So they did these things. But the point I'm trying to get across, these are just examples of how you can build in purposeful habits. The main thing with a purposeful habit is, I try to get people to understand, because we're all human and we all, have these little idiosyncrasies about how we move, because it's just the way we are. You want to find those things, or look at those things in your own movement that maybe, are a deficiency. Maybe you don't have reach. So if you don't have reach, you have to learn how to cut angles sooner. If you're not that fast, then you have to learn to be able to throw people's timing off, cut angles sooner. Grandmaster Karen, he used to have a great saying is, he assumed and trained as if everybody was stronger and faster than him. And so by training with that mindset, it forced him to practice skills or develop purposeful habits that neutralize speed or strength instantly. So this is one of the reasons why he liked to always have a little contact, because he understood you still can't move faster than a person can feel. And by developing his perceptual awareness, this understanding really of what this kind of movement means, he was able to then feel people moving and then kind of skimming along the surface, find those openings and just end it for you. So as you're practicing purposeful habits, just like what I showed in the previous video, what you're trying to do is, within your own body, you're trying to develop these skills, these default mechanisms where, for example, if Jack pushes me, I can resist. I can do that. But the question is, well, why did I resist? Well, I felt him trying to push me. Well, if I felt him trying to push me, that means I recognized what he was doing. That's why I resisted. So he goes to push me again. Well, what if I do that? In other words, if I can make one choice, I can make another. If I can push back because I feel him pushing, then I can also maybe redirect it, because no matter which choice I make, I'm going to make it, or make the decision and respond relatively in the same time frame. So as a part of my habits, if I feel pressure, rather than always resisting, unless I feel like can't get out of the way, I'm always trying to slip things to get back in as quickly as possible and be able to end it as quickly as possible. If I feel somebody trying to pull my arms, I'm just going to move right in and again realign my body and hit. So those are just kind of my own little habits that I've developed, because this is exactly what Grandmaster Perkins and Grandmaster Karen would do. If you went to push John, I'll demonstrate. John would go like this, and he would just start hitting you. If you try to push Tim, he would pocket, and he would catch your arm, and he would. I'm not going to do that. This hand would catch the flat part of the bone and rotate this way. This hand would go in the opposite direction, and then he would torque your shoulder and push into the joint to take all the slack out, because what he wanted to do was pop his shoulder out of the socket. If he didn't do that, it was going to be really bad for you, because he knew once he locked you up and you panic, because you have no choice but to panic, because your body is going to lock up because it doesn't want the shoulder to get torn. And then he knows in that microsecond you can't move, and he's going to flip your head back like the Pez dispenser, or he's going to hit you in the face and tell you don't let that happen. He would do this stuff to me like this, and you're like, oh, no, don't let that happen. Like, really, because, it never occurred to me, Tim, that, that I shouldn't let you do that to me, okay? So when you're developing purposeful habits, you're just trying to figure out those things and those continuing actions where you develop it to the subconscious competence level, where you just don't have to think about it. And it really depends and is dependent on your body type, how fast you can move. I'm getting older, so this stuff I just can't do anymore. So because I can't do it anymore, I also noticed since I've gotten older, I got a lot meaner too. So that's probably a function. So my whole thing is because I can't afford to get into some protracted battle, especially with some young guy. Everything is all about slipping offline, if possible, getting to the future and ending it as quickly as possible. Getting my body out of the way, getting in based on, I can feel where they are relative to my body, and getting in and doing what I need to do.